All right, let's get real for a second. You probably clicked on this because you are tired. You are tired of meetings that could have been emails. You are tired of staring at spreadsheets until your eyes cross. Or maybe you just got promoted to management and you suddenly realized you have absolutely no idea what you were doing. You were basically a toddler trying to fly a jet plane, and you're just hoping nobody notices you're hitting random buttons. Well, lucky for you, I have been around the block a few times and I have read the manual, so you don't have to. Today, we are diving into the Bible of getting things done. We are talking about high output management by Andrew Grove. Now, who is Andy Grove? He isn't some influencer with a ring light and a rented Lamborghini. This guy was the CEO of Intel. He basically built Silicon Valley. He escaped communist Hungary, came to America, and turned a bucket of sand into the microchips that run the device you are listening to me on right now. If Andy Grove tells you how to manage, you shut up and listen. The core problem this book solves is simple but painful. Most managers think their job is to be smart, or to have authority, or to sit in a nice chair. Wrong. Grove says your job is one thing and one thing only: output. That is it. If your team does not produce, you are failing. It does not matter how hard you work. You could work 20 hours a day, but if your team produces nothing, then your value is zero. Harsh, right? But true. So grab a coffee or a stiff drink and let's break this down into some actual lessons you can use before you accidentally burn your company to the ground. Lesson number 1 is what Grove calls the breakfast factory. Imagine you're running a cafe that serves boiled eggs, toast, and coffee. Sounds easy, a monkey could do it. But wait, the customer wants everything hot and ready at the exact same time. The egg takes 3 minutes to boil, the toast takes 1 minute, the coffee takes 30 seconds to pour. If you start everything at the same time, the coffee is cold by the time the egg is done. If you wait for the egg to finish before toasting the bread, the customer gets annoyed. Grove uses this to explain the concept of the limiting step. In any process, there is one specific step that takes the longest, or is the most expensive, or is just the biggest pain in the neck. In the breakfast scenario, it is the egg. The egg is the boss of your timeline. You have to build the entire production process backwards from the time it takes to boil that egg. Now apply this to your actual job. Maybe you're in marketing. You want to launch a campaign. You have the copywriters, the designers, the video editors. Who is the boiled egg in this scenario? Maybe it's the legal department, who takes 3 weeks to approve a tweet. If you do not account for the legal department being slow as molasses, nothing else matters. You can have the best video in the world, but if legal hasn't blessed it, you're serving cold coffee. Your job as a manager is to find the limiting step and fix it, or at least schedule around it. Stop yelling at the toaster when the egg is the problem. This leads us right into lesson number 2, which is the holy grail of this book: managerial leverage. This is the equation you need to tattoo on your brain. A manager's output is equal to the output of their organization plus the output of the neighboring organizations under their influence. Let me translate that into human speak. You are not paid for what you do. You are paid for what your team does. Think of it like a sound system. You are the amplifier. Your team is the speakers. If you unplug the speakers and just hum into the microphone, nobody hears anything. You can hum until you pass out, but the output is zero. But if you turn the volume knob just a tiny bit, the sound from the speakers gets massive. That is high leverage. Low leverage activities are things you spend a lot of time for, but a tiny result. Like fixing the font on a slide deck yourself because you don't trust your intern. Congratulations, you just spent an hour of executive time saving 5 minutes of intern time. That is negative leverage. You are actually costing the company money by existing. High leverage activities are small things you do that have a massive impact. A 10-minute conversation where you stop an employee from quitting. a clear policy that prevents 100 future mistakes, or a simple training session. Imagine you have a sales guy named Kevin. Kevin is terrible. He couldn't sell water in a desert. If you spend 2 hours training Kevin and his sales go up by 20%, that 20% increase happens every day for the rest of the year. That is massive leverage. You put in 2 hours and you got back thousands of hours of productivity. Lesson number 3 is about everyone's favorite torture method, meetings. I know, put down the pitchforks. Grove actually defends meetings. I know, put down the pitchforks. He says meetings are the medium through which managerial work is performed. But here's the catch. Most meetings are garbage because people mix up the two types. There are process-oriented meetings and mission-oriented meetings. Process meetings are the regular checkups. These should be like changing the oil in your car, boring, routine, and essential so the engine doesn't explode. The most important one here is the one-on-one. Listen to me closely. The one-on-one is not for you. It is for the employee. It is their meeting. If you go into a one-on-one and spend 30 minutes talking about your weekend or listing off tasks you are doing it wrong. You should be shutting up and listening. Grove compares it to a family dynamic. If you never talk to your teenager about the small stuff, eventually they're going to crash the car and you will have a crisis. The one-on-one is where you catch the small stuff. It's where you hear the low-level rumbling before the volcano erupts. Then you have mission-oriented meetings. These are ad hoc. These are for when the building is on fire, or you need to decide if you're buying a competitor. The problem is most offices are full of people calling emergency meetings to discuss routine stuff. That's like calling 911 because you ran out of milk. Stop it. If you have to call a meeting to figure out what someone is doing, it means your regular process is broken. A well-run factory doesn't need emergency meetings to figure out where the screws are. Lesson number 4 is about decision-making and the peer group. We've all been in that meeting where nobody wants to make a decision. Everyone's looking around the room, waiting for the most senior person to nod. It's painful. It's like a group of friends trying to decide where to eat dinner. Someone says tacos, someone says sushi, someone says they're not hungry, but they'll eat some of your fries, and you end up standing on the sidewalk for 45 minutes. Grove says you need a system. He calls it free discussion, then clear decision. In the early stage, you want free discussion. You want everyone to argue. You want the junior engineer to tell the vice president that his idea is stupid. This is the peer group stage. It should be messy. If everyone agrees immediately, you're probably missing something. But once the decision is reached, everyone must commit. Grove calls it disagree and commit. Even if you wanted tacos, if the group decides on sushi, you better be the most enthusiastic sushi eater in the restaurant. You don't get to sulk and say, "I told you so," if the sushi is bad. The manager's job here is not to force their opinion, but to drive the process. You're the traffic cop. You make sure everyone gets to speak, and then you force a conclusion. If you just let the debate go on forever, you're not a manager, you're a talk show host. Before we get to the next lesson, I need to ask you a favor. I'm pouring my heart out here trying to save you from managerial mediocrity. The least you can do is hit that like button. It helps the algorithm find other lost souls who need this advice. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Also, I want to know in the comments, what is the most useless meeting you have ever been forced to sit through? I once sat through a meeting about how to reduce the number of meetings. The irony was not lost on me. Let me know your horror stories down below. All right, back to business. Lesson number 5, motivation. Why does an employee fail? Grove says there are only 2 reasons, only 2. Either they can't do it or they won't do it. If they can't do it, that's a capability problem. The solution is training. If they won't do it, that's a motivation problem. The solution is, well, motivation. This sounds simple, but managers mess it up constantly. They try to motivate people who need training, and they try to train people who need motivation. If I ask you to play the violin and you've never held a violin in your life, I can scream at you like a drill sergeant, I can offer you $1 million, I can threaten to fire you. You're still going to sound like a dying cat. You don't need motivation, you need lessons.
On the flip side, if you have a world-class violinist who just hates your guts, giving them violin lessons is not going to help. They know how to play, they just don't want to play for you. Grove says motivation is internal. You cannot actually motivate anyone. You can only create an environment where they motivate themselves. And how do you do that? You make the work matter. You give them clarity. He uses the analogy of sports. Why do people run until they vomit in a marathon, but complain about walking to the printer at work? Because in a marathon, the goal is clear. The feedback is immediate. You know exactly how fast you're running. In most jobs, the goal is fuzzy, and you don't find out if you did a good job until your review 6 months later. If you want high output, create a game. Give your team a scoreboard. Let them see if they're winning or losing in real time. People love to win. They just need to know what the score is.
Lesson number 6 is a concept called task-relevant maturity. This is a fancy way of saying treat people differently based on what they're doing. This is where the old advice of don't micromanage is actually wrong. Sometimes you absolutely should micromanage. Task-relevant maturity is a combination of the skill and the experience a person has for a specific task. Note, I said specific task. You might have a brilliant senior engineer. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah is a genius at coding. When she's coding, her maturity is high. You leave her alone. You get out of her way. If you check on her every hour, she will rightly hate you. But let's say you ask Sarah to negotiate a contract with a vendor, and she has never done that before. Her maturity for that specific task is low. She is a toddler in the world of negotiation. If you use the hands-off approach here, you are setting her up to fail. She needs you to hold her hand. She needs detailed instructions. The mistake managers make is they manage the person, not the task. They say, "Oh, Sarah is smart. I don't need to manage her." Then Sarah accidentally signs a contract that bankrupts the department because she didn't know what she was doing. Your management style must be fluid. Low maturity equals structured instructions. Medium maturity equals emotional support and two-way communication. High maturity equals minimal interference. If you're micromanaging a high-maturity employee, you are a jerk. If you are ignoring a low-maturity employee, you are negligent. Know the difference. Lesson number 7, the performance review. Grove calls this the single most important form of task-relevant feedback, and yet everyone hates it. Managers hate writing them, employees hate reading them. It is awkward, it is uncomfortable. Grove says if you are going to be a manager, you need to get over your fear of being the bad guy. The purpose of a review is to improve performance. That is it. It is not to be nice, it is not to be mean, it is to make the work better. The biggest sin in performance reviews is the surprise. If you walk into a review and tell an employee they have been doing a bad job for 6 months and this is the first time they are hearing about it, you should be fired. That is your failure, not theirs. Why did you wait 6 months to tell them? A review should be a summary of what you've been talking about in your one-on-ones all year. And here's a pro tip from the book. When you're giving a negative review to a high performer who slipped up, prepare for war. Grove says low performers usually accept that they suck, but high performers will fight you. They will argue. They will blame the market. They will blame the tools. They will blame you. You have to move them through the stages of grief. Ignore their denial. Ignore their anger. You have to get them to the stage of assuming responsibility. Until they admit there is a problem, they cannot fix it. It's like therapy, but with spreadsheets. Now, let's wrap this up with a conclusion that ties it all together. High output management is not about being a boss. It is about being a catalyst. Everything we talked about, the breakfast factory, leverage, meetings, motivation, it all comes down to one thing. You are responsible for the result. If your team fails, it is your fault. If your team succeeds, it is their credit. Yeah, I know, that doesn't sound fair. Welcome to management. The final piece of advice I want to leave you with is this. Manage your own time like it is a production line. You have a limited amount of hours in the day.
That is your inventory. If you squander it on low-leverage activities, if you sit in useless meetings, if you try to do everything yourself, you are bankrupting your own potential. Be ruthless with your schedule. Be generous with your attention when it matters. And for the love of all that is holy, learn to delegate. Look, management is hard. It's messy. It involves dealing with human beings, and human beings are weird, emotional, irrational creatures. But if you apply these principles, you stop being a babysitter and you start being a leader. You stop running around putting out fires and you start building a fireproof house. Go out there and increase your leverage. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, seriously hit the subscribe button. I've got more life-changing books coming up, and you don't want to be the only one in your office who doesn't know what's going on. Now, go fix your breakfast factory. I'm out.